So this is my hotel for tonight. Come in. Oh, there's a mirror there. Hello. Then we have the washroom with the shower. Interesting. Then we have, got some food. Nice little table with a chair. A nice small bed. It's not as big as, the front door right here. It's not as big as the one I was in earlier on this week. Then we have an ironing board, some hammer to hang up your clothes. So it's not as big as the one I was in last week, but yes, I'm only here for one night, so it's all good. There's nothing much here. Maybe you guys can recognize this hotel. Maybe not.
Doors opening. Ground floor, doors opening.
So guys, I'm having my breakfast this morning. I got some full English breakfast set: toast, eggs, black pudding, sausage, beans, everything is here, and hot cup of chocolate. DoubleTree by Hilton. Up a bit, but these vehicles need to move.
The City of London is one of the places during the Second World War that sustained huge amounts of damage, and we'll talk about that when we're going over there during what we call the Blitz. The City of London today, financial centre. Now, it's where all the banks and the businesses are. You always know during the week when you go to the City of London, because everybody is walking around in dark suits looking vaguely on the edge. If you see someone smile in the city, it's a tourist, okay? Nobody smiles in the City of London. It's just business. Rest of London, collection of villages, 32 of them, we call them boroughs. This borough is the borough of Kensington and Chelsea. It's also a royal borough, okay? And I'll explain why it's a royal borough in a moment. But 32 boroughs plus the City of London gives us a population of, it's around about 9 million, about 9 million. We're not entirely sure how many people there are here because a few years back we had something called Brexit. You won't have heard of that, we kept it really quiet. Alright, so in terms of the Second World War here then, no part of London was left entirely unscathed by the Second World War. By the time the war reached these shores, Hitler was at the pinnacle of world power. Every European city, the country he'd been to, either conquered or they'd given up. And literally he thought that the same would happen here. He thought that Britain, he turned his attention after the Battle of France. You know this, yeah? The Battle of France ended. Winston Churchill said, the Battle of Britain is about to begin. A battle that was named before it was fought. Hitler assumed that Britain were to do a deal, to keep the empire, and he would run Nazified Europe free to do whatever he wanted. Perhaps under Chamberlain that might have happened, under Churchill it did not. So he was expecting the Battle of Britain. We had just evacuated the forces from Dunkirk. You know about Dunkirk, yeah? 338,000 people were evacuated. Many of those small ships, Churchill appealed to anyone in this country who had a vessel to take it over to France to bring back those men. And he expected 20 to 30,000, 338,000, and many of those small ships left from the River Thames. Oh, we'll see the river later. And although Churchill did not see this as a success, he tempered his sort of like admiration for those who went with the words, evacuations do not win wars. After Dunkirk, we did not see boots on the ground, not British boots on the ground again on the Western Front until D-Day. So what was it like here? Well, after the Battle of Britain was fought in the skies over the southeast of England. Hitler wanted to make this land invasion. He wanted to come by sea, Operation Sea Lion. He was convinced not to do that to start with, to take out the Royal Air Force. So he sent over the Luftwaffe, but the Royal Air Force fought really hard against them, and the Germans sustained huge losses. So eventually, Hitler, frustrated, turned his attention to bombing our cities, right? Now, when he started to bomb the cities, mainly London, do you know how many people died in the Blitz? Over 50,000 people died in the Blitz. Over 180,000 were injured during the Blitz. But 30,000 of those were in London. 30,000 of those who died were in London. Some would say the Blitz saved us. When the Royal Air Force, I believe, was on its knees. It was bruised, but it wasn't broken. But this basically lull in bombing the Royal Air Force and bombing the cities, that helped them to regroup, to start again. Okay, shall we move on now? Thank you very much. Can we go up to the Royal Albert Hall, please?
Yep.
Thank you. Okay, so I said that this is a royal borough, so I'm interspersed in the wall with general London, okay? This is the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea because it is in this borough that our second longest reigning monarch in history was born. Does anybody know who that might be? Tell me who the longest reigning monarch is. Yeah, Queen Elizabeth II, and she was 70 years on the throne, died a couple of years ago, and her first Prime Minister was Winston Churchill. So we're going to turn to the left-hand side here, and as we go to the left, you'll see on your right the Natural History Museum. So Queen Victoria was the second longest reigning monarch in history. She was born in this borough. Natural History Museum over on your right hand side. The Natural History Museum sustained damage as well during the war, but not during what we call the Blitz, after the war in 1944 from the V1 bombs, but I'll talk about that a little bit later. But most of the museums during the war were closed down, the artifacts were taken out, they were hidden in caves, mostly in Wales, and they were used to make weapons and for training for the secret services, the museums in this particular area. So as we head through Kensington and Chelsea, you can see all these beautiful houses on the left hand side. Now a lot of these, imagine one of these houses would have been built for one family, but nowadays they've all been chopped up either into hotels or apartments. There's a few embassies along here, because in the park that we're coming up to there is a palace, and it's called Kensington Palace, and it was in this palace that Queen Victoria was born. Now we won't actually see the palace itself, but trust me, it's there. Does anyone else know anyone who may have lived in Kensington Palace? So Kate and William, and it's still their official London home, Kensington Palace. It's way within the gardens. It was also the home of Princess Diana. Most of you weren't born during her time, but Princess Diana lived here up until her death in Paris. Now we're going to turn to the right hand side here, so the park will be on our left hand side. Now Queen Victoria was married to a bloke called Prince Albert, right? They were desperately in love. They had 9 children together. He died very young, possibly of exhaustion. That's quite a lot of kids. Anyway, after his death, she wanted to put up a little memorial to remind us of her love for Albert. How the Luftwaffe missed this, I have no idea. But coming up on the left-hand side, you will see Queen Victoria's little tribute to Prince Albert. If you look at his right hand, he's holding a book, and that's a book of the Great Exhibition. So 10 years before his death, he put on a huge exhibition here in London. He thought it was going to be rubbish. You know, people didn't think everyone was going to go, but it was massive. It was showcasing all the inventions of the new era, and he made a huge amount of money. And with the money he raised, he built the museums. On the right-hand side is the Royal Albert Hall. Fantastic concert hall. During the Second World War, it remained open. It closed for a period of time during the Blitz, but it remained open, and it was a place where we would have concerts, mainly for servicemen, you know, who were involved in the Second World War, you know, to boost morale, etc. We were only allowed to have a certain amount of people in here. The numbers were much reduced because you weren't allowed to sit in any of the upper galleries, only in the stalls. Winston Churchill made speeches from here. He made one speech here in November of 1944, which was entitled "To You, America," on American Thanksgiving, thanking America for their help during the Second World War. All the windows were blacked out. The roof is actually, is a glass roof, and they painted over the roof so that it was like you couldn't have any lights coming through.
I have a YouTube channel.
YouTube, is that a GoPro?
No, that's a DJI Action 5 Pro. It's not like it's a better version of a GoPro.
Is it? I've got a GoPro, but it's broken.
Yeah. Well, I've recently started a YouTube channel. I've worked with this tour guide already, and she's very good. So hopefully today we get a better outlook of London history. Not saying that the previous tour guide was not good. He was very good also, but I was looking for a bit more information. So hopefully this tour guide here can give us a bit more info. So I'll catch up with you guys shortly.
Okay, so now this then, Kensington Gardens, this is 270 acres, this park here on the left. And then we're about to cross over a little road, and on the other side we're going to have another park, and that is the largest of London's royal parks. Does anybody know the name of it? It's called Hyde Park, yeah? Maybe you may not have heard of it. And that's another 350 acres. So that's a lot of park. You won't see this in other European cities, you know, the amount of green space that we have here in London. In Hyde Park, right in the middle, there was a big lake. Now, during the Second World War, all of the water in all the parks had to be covered over. Because of course we had the blackouts, and even cars. You know, cars used to have just like little slivers of light on their headlights. There was a lot of accidents during the Second World War in London from the cars not being able to see properly. No street lights, everything, you know, after dark, sundown was blacked out. Now, right in the middle of the park, then, where the lake is, they've got lovely little restaurants around. You can take boats out on the lakes, and you could do horse riding in the park. You can see some horses in a moment over on the left-hand side. And the Londoners use the parks like their back gardens, you know, because most of us live in small apartments here, and so you know, we're lucky to have these parks. When I say it's a royal park, they're originally attached to the royal palaces. So what do you think that they were used for originally, these royal parks? What did the kings and queens like to do back in the day?
Hunting.
Hunting, yeah, absolutely. So they were originally all hunting grounds, which is why we have so many of them here. If you look as well, I mean, the schools use the parks like they were for sports, etc. Always on Saturday, Sunday mornings, you know, got lots of people playing football, rugby, etc. in the parks, but you can see people horse riding. If you come here early in the morning, the army horses, the household cavalry, are also exercised here in the mornings in this park. And that's because their home is just up here on the left-hand side, the barracks for the household cavalry. The household cavalry during the Second World War were mechanised in 1939, and then in 1945 King George VI ordered for them to be reinstated as a mounted unit. So, and it's pretty much the same division as it is today. So here on the left-hand side is the barracks of the household cavalry. Now, our horses live on the first floor of this building. That would be the second floor to you, you know, because we have the first floor, the ground floor, then the first floor. So they go up in elevators up to the first floor, and then just here on the left-hand side, this little balcony, this is the balcony for the horses. Yeah, and they come out on the balcony sometimes for a smoke. And you can often see the little horses' heads poking over the top of the balcony. It's very cute. No horses up there today, but on the right-hand side you can see rhinoceros flying over here. The area we're in now is called Knightsbridge. It's one of the wealthiest areas in London. It's quite a transient area because most of the people that own property here don't live here very often, you know. Especially this apartment building coming up on the left-hand side. One of the most expensive, if not the most expensive apartment building in London. Most of the people who own apartments in here are from the Arab nations and the Russians. And the apartment building, the guys who developed it, they kept the top apartment here, and they just put it on the market for £150 million. So you can see it's not cheap. So this building here on the left, they used to have the McLaren showroom here, but it's just gone. I don't know where. But you can see here on the left-hand side. And on the parallel road to where we are is Harrods department store. So the most famous department store in the country, Harrods. And so when we cross over these traffic lights, you look at over your right shoulder, you can get a glimpse of Harrods.
Did you see it yesterday?
You saw it yesterday.
I forget that you come into town on a coach now, right? Instead of the underground. Yeah.
So Harrods actually came here after, at the time of the Great Exhibition, because Mr. Harrod wanted to capitalise on all of the people going to Prince Albert's exhibition. The road to the right-hand side is where you go if you want to buy any labels. You know, it's all posh shopping down here. And Harvey Nichols, another one of our big department stores, on the right-hand side. Funnily enough, all the land around here is owned by one family, and it is headed up by a man, the Duke of Westminster, Mr. Grosvenor, and through marriages and acquisitions, etc., he gained all of the land in this area. He's worth £9.4 billion. He's 34 years old. Yeah, and he just got married. So basically, if you buy a house here, you can buy the house, but you cannot buy the land. You lease the land for 100 years, and that is very typical in London, but most of the land is leased. Now we're coming up to an area called Hyde Park Corner, or the Duke of Wellington Place. Have you heard of the Duke of Wellington? Okay. What did he do with the Duke of Wellington? Have you heard of Napoleon? Okay, so who defeated Napoleon? I've given you a clue.
Duke of Wellington.
Duke of Wellington. Now, when you go to Paris, you're going to hear a lot about Napoleon as well, you know, because Napoleon, other than Hitler to us, was our greatest threat historically. Now, in Paris, they built a huge arch for Napoleon's victories. You know, you're going to see our victory arch now. And when you see the one in Paris, you're going to think ours is a bit rubbish in comparison. But we didn't actually build this for Wellington, you know. We just gave them one we already had, like, well done, have an arch. So ours is a little bit less impressive than the one in Paris. We're going to go all the way around a circle here, because I'm going to try to point out a memorial to you on here at Hyde Park Corner of the Duke of Wellington Place. But as we take off in a moment, if you look on the left, you can see one of the entrances to Hyde Park. And then you see a honey-colour house, which has the rather lovely address of number 1 London, because this was the westerly edge of London. It's also the home of the Duke of Wellington, and the current Duke of Wellington still has an apartment there.
Martin, can we go all the way round, just and go as slow as you can past the, you know, the memorial there is over there?
Yeah.
Because we can't get close to it now because they're doing all road works. And then when you come back round, we're going to go down Park Lane.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so the entrance to Hyde Park here on the left. Number 1 London, or Apsley House on the left. On the right, a statue of the Duke of Wellington. And our arch, the Wellington Arch on the right. Now, as we continue, we're going to go around to the right. So we need to have a look on the left-hand side.
So if you can get in the outside lane, full possible.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you can see a memorial, and this memorial was put up in 2012, and it's a memorial to Bomber Command of the Second World War. So if you look to the left now, and you can see inside, there's a lot of bronze figures, and they are all looking up to the sky. The monument on the top, there is made from a Halifax bomber.
What's he doing?
That cyclist skid past
okay.
me.
Which was found in Belgium, with the men still at their stations. It was a Canadian Halifax bomber, and here they only got this memorial in 2012 because they fell out. Bomber Harris, who was in command of the unit, fell out with Winston Churchill over some of his bombing techniques, and certainly the bombing of Dresden towards the end of the war. 55,583 the Bomber Command pilots died during the Second World War. That is more pilots than we have in the Royal Air Force today, and many of them were just teenagers.
Thank you.
You can see we also have other war memorials around the square. The memorial to Australia here on the right hand side, and further across on the other side the memorial to New Zealand. So if you look over, you see those spokes sticking up the ground over to the right hand side, and it's supposed to look like the haka, which is a New Zealand Maori dance, which I don't know if you've ever seen any sports. So you know, New Zealand sports, always at the beginning of their sports they do the haka. It looks very scary. Okay, we're going to turn to the left. We're heading down a street called Park Lane, and this is another very expensive street in London. If you've ever seen the London Monopoly board, you know you don't want to land in someone's hotel on Park Lane. We've got a couple of posh hotels down here. The hotels during the Second World War, you know, they used to use, like, the fact that they had air raid shelters in their promotional literature. Here on the right hand side you can see a horse's head. This is the largest freestanding bronze statue in London, and the bloke who sculpted that, he comes back every now and again, he puts out his scaffold and he cleans off the bird poop on top of the horse's head. There is a run going on over on the left hand side through the park. You can see, yeah? Every morning we do that in London.
Yeah, that's what I'd be if I wasn't here. Yeah.
So just coming up on the right hand side, you'll see the Dorchester Hotel. Eisenhower stayed at the Dorchester Hotel during his time in London because his offices were just around the corner where I'm going to take you to show you. They still have the Eisenhower Suite here at the Dorchester Hotel, where you can rent out the suite or hire out the suite for the night, and it has lots of paraphernalia dedicated to Eisenhower. So here on the right hand side is where he stayed during the Second World War. Okay, in just a moment we're going to turn to the right hand side, and we are going to see a memorial to the animals of the Second World War. This memorial was unveiled in 2012 also, and it was unveiled by Queen Elizabeth II. Of course, animals during wartime have always been helpful, and in the Second World War most of it was fought on horseback, and the US and the UK continued this tradition of using animals during the Second World War. Many of the bigger animals used to carry things around: pigeons for communication, dogs for protection, and here on the left hand side the animals in war, and you see on the right it says they had no choice. And of course this year we have the 80th anniversary of VE Day. We're coming into an area now, very, very exclusive area of Mayfair. And we're coming into Grosvenor Square. And Grosvenor Square, again, all this area as well is owned by that billionaire I was telling you about. He owns this area and the area that we drove through earlier. And a lot of the places around here are named after him and his family. But this area during the Second World War was nicknamed Little America. It's where the American Embassy was. You can see now it's been turned into a hotel. And also Eisenhower's headquarters. So there's going to be a building coming up on the left hand side. You'll see a plaque on the wall. This here on the right, this was the old American Embassy. The American embassy moved out, and I will explain why. On the right hand side you can see there is a statue there, and that statue is of Eisenhower, but it is actually covered up at the moment. But look now on your left hand side.
Can you just pull up in a minute on the right?
If you look on the left, can you see Dwight Eisenhower on your left hand side? And it was literally the corner room on the edge of that building, on the first floor. So the second floor to you, the first floor to us, is where he had his headquarters. Grosvenor Square back in, after, in 1942, would have been teeming with American servicemen and personnel. And now today you can see, a little bit forward,
Maybe a touch forward. Thank you very much, Martin.
you can see here there is a statue of Roosevelt. So, the statue was erected in 1948. It was paid for by the British people. They asked for donations within 6 days. The money had been founded for the statue for Roosevelt. Roosevelt, of course, before before U.S. Joined the war, gave us a lot of help. Americans were not allowed to give you money directly from that was going back to the 1930s. Acts of neutrality. So there was a loophole, the lend and lease. Do you know all about the lend and lease? So basically, so some of you are nodding, some of you are shaking your head. So lend and lease was a loophole where President Roosevelt was able to lend us machinery, or lend us money and lease us machinery. But with the sort of like on the premise that they would get it back. I mean, probably not going to get it all back, but he did lend us a huge amount of money, and we finished paying off that money in 2006. So we do pay our debts, it just takes a little bit of time. So Roosevelt was here, his wife was here for the unveiling of the statue, along with the King and Winston Churchill. Over to the right hand side you can see that statue of an eagle over there? Yeah, so this is to the Eagle Squadrons. So the Eagle Squadrons, do you know who the Eagle Squadrons were? No, so the Eagle Squadrons fought alongside the Royal Air Force and the Royal Canadian Air Force during the Second World War, before America had joined the war. So they were volunteers from the US, and they trained either in Europe or in the Canadian Air Force. And with threat of losing their citizenship, American citizenship, but that was redacted in 1944, it was all pardoned, but they were originally fought alongside our pilots. There were 7,000 Americans in the war before America joined the war, and in 1942, September 42, they were inaugurated into the US Air Force.
Thank you very much.
So Little America, here in the centre of London. Now, your embassy, or as it was, which is now a hotel, I think you can still see they left the eagle on top of the embassy, unless they've taken it down now. It was there last time I saw.
Right, thank you. Let's go on to Piccadilly. So out by round Berkeley Square to the Ritz, and then we'll go Piccadilly, Trafalgar Square, up the Strand, St Paul's, and then they can use the Louvre.
And they've taken the eagle down. But that was your... oh no, the eagle is still there. You can see on the top of the building over to the right. Yes, the old American embassy. And the reason that the American embassy, moved out of this building, firstly, it kind of was too small for purpose anymore. It wasn't considered safe enough. But one of the other reasons was this land clause. You had only one of the only embassies in the world that didn't own the land it was situated on. And so the Americans said to Mr. Reverend, look, can we buy the land? And Mr. Reverend said, yeah, sure, I don't want to have to buy it, I'll give it to you, as long as you give me back all the land that was sequestered during American independence. Well, you can imagine which way that will. But so eventually the Americans moved out, and now you've got a real super duper embassy on the south side of the river. So going through Mayfair then, this is a place where, you can still find little boutique stores. If you like cars, you'll find a lot of flashy cars in this area. Some hotels just, hire flashy cars to park outside their hotels to show that they are a flashy hotel. The corner on the right-hand side, this was originally called the Coburg Hotel. 5-star hotel in London. It was called the Coburg. It changed its name during the Second World War because Coburg is a German name. We're going to turn to the left here. As we turn to the left, we will have on our right-hand side the Ritz Hotel. Very prestigious hotel, again, the Ritz. Very well known, well known for afternoon tea, but also during the Second World War. It housed some of the European royalty. Obviously, you know, the royalty fled Europe, they came to London and they stayed in the five-star hotels here. The Albanian royal family had the top floor of the Ritz Hotel and they actually paid their bill in gold bullion. The Marie Antoinette suite in here was where Churchill, de Gaulle and Roosevelt would meet to plan the offensive and the D-Day landings. So everywhere, now this part of London was not bombed in any way near as much as the East End and the City, which I'll talk about when we get a little closer. However, it was still bombed. And in May 1941, which was towards the end of the first period of the Blitz, Westminster was bombed. There was a church down here, which I'll show you on the right-hand side, that was destroyed during the Second World War, and the mayor of Westminster was also killed whilst he was out doing his rounds. The end of the street to the right, can you see that building with a clock right at the bottom? That's a palace. That is St James's Palace, which is the most senior palace in the country. Look to the left, Bond Street. That's where you go if you've got a lot of money to spend. We're just going to stop here. Have a look now on the left-hand side at this beautiful arcade here. Arcade to us is different perhaps to you. You think of like money slots, right? But this arcade fills shops. Very, very beautiful. We've got one on the other side as well, two on the other side, but not quite as lovely. This bloke here, who's got the top hat on, look, he's waving, give him a wave. He's called a beadle, and what his job is to keep order in that arcade. So he stops you chewing gum, he stops you swinging your umbrella, anything naughty that you might feel like doing, the beadle is there to stop you. Yeah? The beadle. Right next to, so it's actually a walk-through that was put there to stop the noise from the people that lived here in this beautiful building next door, the Burlington House, which is an old mansion house, which is now the Royal Academy of Arts. That's not it. But so have a look in the courtyard here on the left, and then turn your attention to the right-hand side of Fortnum and Mason. It's a beautiful building. Fortnum and Mason on the right. This is our late Queen. Her favourite grocers. She used to have her groceries delivered by horse and cart every week. And you can see there's a clock above the door, and there's two little doors. And on the hour, Mr. Fortnum and Mr. Mason come out and give us a wave. But Mr. Fortnum is stuck, like, or Mr. Mason, I don't know which one he is. Can you see he's stuck on the right? No, that's been like that for a week. Now look at the hat yard on the right-hand side. You see the coat of arms of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II above the door, because that was her bookstore. So there is a lot of royal shops around here, or shops at least where the royals have shopped. And if they shop in a shop for a certain amount of years, you get to put their royal warrant above the door. So just coming up on the right side is St James's Church. This church is the only church that was built outside the City of London by our master architect, Sir Christopher Wren. It was destroyed in the Second World War, so it was built or rebuilt after the war. We're coming up to Piccadilly Circus now, a great meeting place for Londoners, for tourists, and right in the middle there is a statue, the statue of Eros. And Eros, because, you know, it's got this, like, connotations of love, hasn't it, Eros? This is where everyone meets their Tinder date on a Saturday night. It's really true. You come here around at 7 o'clock on a Saturday, you see everybody looking at their phones and looking around trying to find their date. Now, you can see also here at the Piccadilly Circus, it's not like a doo-doo-doo, not that kind of circus. It literally means circle, an old English word. On the right-hand side, when we cross over, you'll see the Criterion Theatre, the only theatre that stayed open during the Second World War, because it has an underground stage. All the lights throughout the war of Piccadilly Circus, because it's a little bit reminiscent of Times Square in New York City. You'll see the big electronic billboards on the left. Everything was dark. All the lights were turned on, and they were not turned on again in Piccadilly Circus until 1949. So London, pretty dark during those years, but V-Day 1945, this was an absolute huge place of celebration. People jumping on buses, it absolutely packed to the rafters. Even our Queen, well, she wasn't the Queen at the time, but Queen Elizabeth II. Sorry. And her sister, Margaret, joined the celebrations. They snuck out of Buckingham Palace to come and join the celebrations. Look to the left-hand side. Yep, we're going right. You can see these big electronic billboards. To the left, look down Shaftesbury. We're having loads of theatres down here. Now, the area down to the left-hand side, and you probably possibly walked. Did you walk this way or not?
We did Trafalgar Square, but not to the left.
Ah, okay. So basically got the areas of Soho, which is a big party area, and Chinatown. And if you look now down to your left, you can see where that clock is. And that's Leicester Square, and that is really the heart of London's entertainment area. So if we have red carpet do's, you know, then they happen there. And all around the square now, they've just redone it, and they've got like put out characters, lots of fictional characters. Mary Poppins is there, Paddington Bear, Harry Potter on his broomstick. At the end of this road, you've got two theatres. On the left is the Theatre Royal Haymarket, where the Irish playwright Oscar Wilde used to premiere his plays. And on the right now, His Majesty's Theatre, playing the Phantom. What do you reckon that was called 2 years ago?
Her Majesty.
Well done, Her Majesty's, yeah. And the Phantom is just about to close here now. It's been going for quite a few years. On the right-hand side here, you can see a statue. We're going to go nice and slowly, please, Martin. You can see a statue here on the right. This is a statue of King George III. You might recognise him from your history. Yes, it was during the reign of George III when we gracefully withdrew from your country. I'm just checking you're awake. So now we're coming into the absolute centre of London, Trafalgar Square. Named after a battle, the Battle of Trafalgar, fought and won by the man who is on top of the column which dominates the square. His name is Nelson. Over to the left-hand side, first of all, you can see the National Gallery. National Gallery of Western European Art. Fantastic gallery full of art from the 1100s to the 1900s. Rubens, Rembrandt, Van Gogh, Caravaggio, Mani. It's all in there, and it's all for free. The Battle of Trafalgar. Have you heard of the Battle of Trafalgar? So it was fought, during the Napoleonic Wars. And why is it so important? Because it ended the Napoleonic naval battles. Nelson's column, Hitler, had plans to take that to Berlin. He wanted to take it to Berlin. Because it was such an important battle. He was a bit of a maniac, now, this battle ended the naval Napoleonic Wars. Not the Napoleonic Wars, but the naval ones. Nelson won it, but he died at it. What normally happens to you, it was a naval battle far away. What happens when you die at sea? Buried at sea, right? But he was too important, we wanted to bring him back, but we had a problem how to get him back without him decomposing. So we decided to pop him in a barrel of rum. Because, alcohol preserves the body, right? Tell myself. Anyway, when we got him back, we opened up the barrel and had to look inside, and there he is, he's fine. But there's no rum. Because on the way back, they've got thirsty. And they bored holes in the barrel and drank the rum and also the blood of Nelson. And to this day in the Navy, Nelson's blood, that's what they call rum. They know it as Nelson's blood. I don't know. It's not me, it's history. On the right, there is a statue of King Charles I, the only king of England to be publicly tried and executed on order of his own people. And he's looking down the street to where he had his head chopped off on a very cold January day in 1649. We're going to go that way a little bit later, but can you see behind him there's a plaque on the floor on the right? And that marks the absolute centre of London. So we say 25 miles from London, 25 miles from that plaque there. Now we are going to head to the city of London. So the oldest part of London.
We'll go this way, this way.
Yeah, up the Strand, please.
Oh, Strand, okay,
Yeah,
cool, yeah.
thank you.
You can see as well the lions around here. They have been petitioning to put little fences around the lions because people keep climbing on them and falling off. So in my opinion, you climb on a lion, it's your own fault if you fall off, right? Now, just by this tree on the left, can you see this tree? There's a lamp here. And look, this is a police station, the smallest police station in London. Look, you can see the slits in the stone. So tiny little police station there in the square. We're going to turn to the right-hand side here, and as we turn to the right, if you look at the left, you can see a statue at the bottom of the National Gallery, and that is a statue of George Washington, yeah. George Washington's statue is standing on American soil. Did you know that? because he didn't. George Washington always said he would never stand on English soil. We actually bought the soil from America for the statue. Very true. We're heading now then along the Strand. It's mainly a commercial street today. A couple of theatres along here, a couple of hotels. But historically, as London grew, this was where the wealthy would build their mansions outside of the city because the city was so disgusting. What did we used to do with our waste? Yeah, literally just chuck it out the window. But because we're English and we're quite polite, we used to shout a warning to let you know it was coming. And so the warning that we shouted was in French, because the last successful invasion of our country was by a Frenchman in 1066. So we shouted, "Garde l'eau," watch out, water. L'eau becomes what word? The loo, yeah, exactly. We're heading to the city, the square mile, the oldest part. It's not going to look 2,000 years old because we've had two major disasters in the city. Look to the right hand side, you can see the Savoy Hotel. It looks like the front of a Rolls Royce here on the right hand side. The hotels during the Second World War, for a lot of the left leaning people, were actually a source of quite dissent because they were like, they had the best shelters, but nobody was allowed into the shelters. If you look sometimes around a city, I'll try to show you today, but if you had a shelter in your house, you'd write it on the side of the walls. But everybody knew that the hotels had these, very well reinforced shelters. And but of course, you were only allowed in if you were staying at the hotel. The next building on the right, we're just next to the traffic light. You see it's Bush House, and this is where the BBC World Service was broadcast from. It's also where, from here, that they would send messages to the French resistance from the BBC Broadcasting House, and these messages would usually start with a weather report, and they were able to put secret messages in to send to the resistance. The building today is no longer the BBC Broadcasting House. Now it's part of a university, of King's University, and opposite it we have the London School of Economics. There's a couple of universities here, all under the umbrella of the University of London. So just here now on your right hand side, BBC Broadcasting House, King's College, and on the left the LSE. So as we get into the City of London, the first thing we're going to see is the Royal Air Force Church. There are two statues outside, one of Bomber Harris, who was in control of Bomber Command during the Second World War, and Hugh Dowding, who was in control of Fighter Command during the Second World War. The building itself, the Royal Air Force Church, was very badly damaged by flying shrapnel during the war. Most of the people who died in the Blitz died from flying shrapnel. We're going to turn left here, and you'll see the damage on the side, but first of all you can see the statues outside. I always think the statue of Hugh Dowding looks like King Charles. The one right over to the right hand side, I think he looks a bit like King Charles. And here on the right, he doesn't look like King Charles. This is Bomber Harris. So on the right now then, the Royal Air Force Church. And if you keep looking, look at the side of the church and you can see the shrapnel damage from from the war, from the Blitz. And if you imagine what it does to the buildings, you can see the death of 30,000 people, many of them dying from that flying shrapnel. On the left-hand side is the Royal Courts of Justice. This is the highest civil court in the land. So lots of very high-profile cases happen here. Prince Harry was here a few months ago. He was suing the newspapers. Amber Heard sued our newspapers here, and when she was here with Johnny Depp, oh my gosh, you couldn't get near the place. In the middle of the road, it's difficult to see it when we get next to it, but there is a dragon, and that dragon is welcoming us into the City of London. We're now inside the city then, which was very badly bombed during the Second World War. We're talking about the Blitz. The 7th of September 1940 is the day that we refer to as Black Saturday. On this day, over 350 bombers, accompanied by another 600-odd fighter planes, flew to London. And released their bombs on the east end of London. On that day alone, over 400 people were killed, 1,200 were wounded. And this began 57, all bar one, consecutive days and nights of bombing in the city of London. Now, Hitler expected that it would kill morale, but it didn't. It had the opposite effect. People came together. People were more defiant. They wanted to kill morale, they should have bombed the pubs. Talking of pubs, if you have a look here on the left-hand side, you can see the old Cheshire Cheese. Can we do slowly, Martin? Thank you. Just here now on your left. This is the oldest pub in London. Look at the old alleyways, medieval alleyways, super small little doors. You have to duck to go inside the rooms. Charles Dickens is drunk in that pub. Conan Doyle was drunk in that pub, and other literary figures. The first great disaster, before we get out, the first great disaster here in the city of London was the fire. Everybody heard of the fire in London? In 1666, it ripped through the city, yeah, and destroyed 4/5 of it. And then, of course, the second great disaster comes in the form of the Second World War. The church we're going to see now was built after the Great Fire of London, okay, in just 35 years. And this is the People's Cathedral. We'll see the Royal Church later, but this is the People's. Let's go. You can leave big bags on the coach. If you don't want to bring them, you don't have to. If you want to get a coffee, you need to bring some money. It's a little bit chilly out.
What did you do to them yesterday?
Alright guys, so I'm sitting behind St. Paul's Cathedral. I'm just waiting on the group at the moment. They're gonna be here shortly, and then we're gonna move on with our tour.
Okay, so going back to the Second World War and what it was like in the city. Now, most people had their children, were evacuated during the Second World War. In fact, during the Second World War, London was at 25% capacity, went down to 25%, and the levels of the people living in London have only just reached again what they were from pre-war. We had rationing in the city. Do you know when rationing stopped? Or we had rationing in the country. Do you know when food rationing stopped after the war? It was later, one might think. It was not until 1953 that they stopped food rationing. Yeah, my mother said she never had any chocolate until she was 7 years old. Imagine that, huh? But yeah, it was much later than one might imagine. This part of London then was heavily bombed. 2/3 of the city of London was bombed during the Second World War. Where did people go for shelter? Well, first of all, they were told not to go to the underground. But then later, people did use the underground as shelters. We didn't have any proper shelters. So they used the underground, and rather than, because the air raid sirens used to go off all night long, so rather than go back to their homes, people would sleep in the underground. So it wouldn't be unusual to go to work, using the tube and to be stepping over people that were asleep. Here on the left-hand side, this is a fairly new building. It's the Bloomberg headquarters in Europe. And underneath this building, there is a Roman temple to the cult of Mithras.
That's right.
Well,
It was in the news.
it was actually, this was actually found, this temple here was actually found after the Second World War, because the building here was destroyed, and when they excavated it, they found this temple. And when Mr. Bloomberg built his building here, part of this building he left as a museum. So you can go, it's free, and you can go 21 feet down and go and see a Roman temple underneath the building. So another offshoot of the Second World War is the new buildings of the city, because after the war we built fast, and some of the buildings were a bit rubbish. And so we're in the process of replacing a lot of these buildings. But what I want you to have a look at is the size of the streets around here. And this goes back to the Fire of London. You remember the Fire of London wiped out the city when we had plans to kind of rebuild it. So look here on the left at these very small little streets. We had plans to rebuild it kind of like Paris with big wide streets, but we couldn't work out the street plan. Look here on the right, you can see these very small little streets. So we rebuilt it on the old medieval street plan. So it's a new city, but an old street plan. 27 miles of alleyways through the city. The Great Fire of London, we're going to see the monument to it in just a moment. So, Martin will go really nicely and slowly for us. As we turn to the right, if you look to the left-hand side, you'll see a monument built by the same man who built St Paul's Cathedral. And this monument is 202 feet tall. And if you lay it backwards, it hits the spot in Pudding Lane where the fire began. And it is situated on the spot where the first church burnt down in the fire. So get ready to have a look on the left-hand side, and you can see the monument to the Great Fire of London. There we go, on your left. Now the Fire of London didn't kill many people, it only killed about 9 people, but it did kill something that was killing all the people. Anyone know what that was? The rats. Yeah, there was a plague. The year before, 1665, the plague was rife in London. And it was so contagious and so deadly. If you've got the fire in your house, you literally got a red cross painted on your door. If you've got the plague, rather, not the fire. Red cross painted on your door. Nobody in, nobody out. Now get ready. We're on London Bridge. But look to your left, and you can see the beautiful Tower Bridge. Now, Tower Bridge is what we call a bascule bridge. So it opens up in the middle. Bascule means seesaw in French. It opens up in the middle to let big ships through. It's fine. You can go first because we're going to try to make a stop down there. So keep looking, and you can see a big ship down there. That's HMS Belfast. I'm going to talk about Belfast in just a moment. Now, London Bridge, up until the 1730s, was the only bridge across the river in London. And at the end of this bridge, you can see 2 little dragons on either side. And they are telling us we're leaving the city because they are facing away from us. And we're going to turn left at the end. And right, so here, look, can you see the little dragons? Now, left. And right at the end, you can see a spike here on the left. And this is a spike to remind us that we had spikes all the way along London Bridge. Anyone know what we put on our spikes? Yes, heads. Heads of traitors. We dipped them in tar and stuck them on spikes. So, the law courts were right in the west. We'll see where they were in a little bit. And as you would travel down eastways to the Tower of London, just a little further east, you would go under London Bridge and you would see the heads of traitors, knowing that was to be your fate. Now, between these 2 bridges, London Bridge that we just went over and Tower Bridge, which we will go back over, this used to be the port of London. So this was where all the docks were. But later, the docks moved out further east, and that's why the east end of London was heavily bombed as well during the Second World War, because the docks were situated there. But again, the plan of bombing the cities, there wasn't really any proper plan. And that's why the Blitz wasn't as effective as Hitler would have liked. You can see a lot of the warehouse buildings here on the left-hand side. Okay, so we're going to head back and we're going to go over the Tower Bridge now, back to the north side of the river. So London really is divided by the north and the south. And the river is super important. It's important for a lot of reasons, but I mean, the reason that London's the capital city is because the river runs out into the North Sea. And when I said that the small boats that went over to Dunkirk came from the Thames, because it runs out into the North Sea, so it's a fantastic trade route as well. The Romans recognised this, the Normans, when they invaded 1,000 years later, also recognised this. And at this point, the river is wide enough and deep enough to let big ships through. You go a bit further west, and it's much narrower and much shallower. Look on the right-hand side. This is a nod to our maritime history in this area. The pub, beautiful pub, the Shipwrights Arms, with Mother Thames holding it up. The river was important during the Second World War as well. I mean, we had the blackouts. They tried to cover a lot of the river up, and the reason is because our river is not straight, and it's got a very significant bend at it further east, in the area called the Isle of Dogs. And the Luftwaffe were able to use this bend in order to pinpoint better the bombing in the East End and the city. So it was very distinctive. So we're going to cross over then the Tower Bridge, and on the other side we'll see the Tower of London. As I said before, 900 years of history. 3 queens of England lost their heads. 2 kings of England were executed in the Tower. The last time that there was an execution took place in the Tower of London was during the Second World War. It was actually used as a prison during the Second World War. Rudolf Hess, he was imprisoned in the Tower of London during the Second World War. But the last execution was a man called Joseph Jacobs, who was a German spy, who was shot inside the tower by firing squad. And it hadn't been used as a prison or a place of execution since the late 1700s before that. Now, as we turn left here, you're going to see up ahead of you then the Tower Bridge, beautiful Tower Bridge. And the Tower of London, it was started by William the Conqueror, and he invaded this country in 1066, the last successful invasion. And he built a tower to show off his new regime. Nothing says like a new regime like a fortress. And he didn't spend that much time here. Once he'd established the tower, he left and went back to France. But he established putting all of his people in prominent positions and basically took over. The tower would have been massively imposing back in those days when it was first built. But like today, you know, now everything around it really dwarfs the tower. Incidentally, this building on the left-hand side, when they were building this, they found a bomb here from the Second World War. And this is another thing, you know, that we think, you know, of course, the war was like 60 years ago, but we're still finding live bombs. I don't know if you heard, but the other day the Eurostar was closed down because they found a bomb on the Eurostar. Not on the Eurostar, but on the close enough to the tracks. So right ahead of us now then is the Tower Bridge. Yeah, we have a race on the River Thames every year between 2 of our top universities, Oxford and Cambridge, and that one year had to be delayed because they found a bomb in the River Thames. So, you know, it is still something that is ongoing, finding these bombs.
There was one found a while ago, wasn't it? In someone's back garden.
So you get great views as well of the bridge and from the bridge. And over to the right hand side, so that goes out further east, and you can see all the tall buildings over on the right, and that's the old Docklands. It was redeveloped in the 1980s, but before that, that was where the docks were. And up to the 1960s, you had the largest dock in Europe. If you look over your right shoulder, you can see more of those really pretty warehouse buildings that are now turned into posh apartments. And if you look at the river, look at the wall of the river. Can you see the green marks on the wall of the river? That's where the tide comes up to. So between the low and the high tide here, there is 27 feet. And if you look down on the river wall on the left-hand side, like we said from up there, you can see again entry to the Traitors' Gate. So that's where the boats would go in if you were to be imprisoned or executed in the Tower of London. If you look at the tower on the left, you can see the part with the 4 weather vanes in the middle. That's the earliest part, the bit that was built by William the Conqueror. The rest of it is mainly 13th and 14th century. You can see there is a wall all around, a moat, sorry, all the way around, and the moat is dry now. It used to have water in it, but it was pretty disgusting. In fact, they used to say it was the tower's best defence because you couldn't get anywhere near it because it smelled so bad. And inside the Tower of London, we keep the priceless, uninsurable crown jewels. And we've got the largest clear-cut diamond in the world in this collection of 530 carats. Now, I said that 3 queens of England were executed here. 2 of them were the wives of, anyone know which king? Yes, Henry VIII, the most infamous king in history. We say divorced, beheaded, died. Divorced, beheaded, survived. That's what happened to the wives of Henry VIII. What did we used to use to execute people? The guillotine was the French. They were very good at it. We used an axe, absolutely. We were less good, less accurate. And you know, if you were going to chop off someone's head with an axe, you might want to have a drink beforehand. And so a lot of them were drunk when they would go to the block to chop off someone's head. You've heard of Mary Queen of Scots, have you? When Mary, she wasn't executed here, but when she was executed, put her head on the block. The axe man, he'd had one too many. And first swing of the axe hit her in the shoulder. There's third in the back of the head and a third connected with her neck. Yeah, it was brutal, really, really brutal. So Henry VIII's second wife, she actually paid, or made Henry pay for an expert swordsman to come from France to chop her head off. Imagine that. Because she knew how gruesome it was. The youngest queen that was executed here was just 17 years old. Now, it's a Roman city, so let's see something Roman. On the right-hand side, you're going to see a little piece of wall. And this piece of wall dates back to the Roman times. When the Romans came, they built a wall all around the city. So look on the right-hand side now, and we have a few pieces of the wall remaining. So here it is on the right.
Very thick.
It is. Yeah, they're very thick. You can tell Roman walls as well because they have tiles in between them now. It's like it's supposed to be a lot more sturdy. Now, I said you had to be special to be executed in the tower. If you were less special, you got executed just outside. In a moment, on the right-hand side, you'll see a war memorial to the fishing fleet and the navy of the First World War. And then, if you look just beyond here, you can see some little palm trees. So we keep going. So these little palm trees that you can see on the right-hand side now, where those people, that gaggle of people, that's the execution site outside the tower. So that's where you would have had your head chopped off. And there's a plaque there, you know, naming all the people who were killed. Now, we talked about September 1940, then to May 1941, London was under constant attack from the Luftwaffe. There was a lull in the bombing. It continued, but there was a lull after this. Look at the pub on the right, the hand-drawn quarters. You can tell the history of our country by the names of our pubs. Some things you think we want to forget, but no, let's name a pub after it. Do you know what it means to be hand-drawn and quartered?
Yes.
Yes, pretty gross. Yeah. So, after this, the bombing didn't continue, and then it didn't stop. And in 1944, if you look to the right, actually, you can see a bombed-out church right now. I know, right, it's called St Dunstan's Church, and we've got a few churches like this, and rather than rebuild them or take them down, they just leave the outline of the church. 1944-45, we were then bombed with the V1s and the V2s. The V1s that were known as the Doodles. And they were pilotless planes. And by spring 1941, the actual defences over London had improved quite a lot. We had big barrage balloons, so the planes had to fly over them, and then all these steel cables running across London so that the planes flew into them. And the RAF, the radar got better, and they were better at detecting and shooting down the planes. So why the Germans changed their tactics to bombing nighttime as well, because they lost too many planes during the day. By 1944, they had the pilotless planes, the doodlebugs. The doodlebugs would basically fly over London, and they would run out of petrol. And then you would just hear this buzzing above you, and you had 15 seconds to get out of the way. And a lot of the doodlebugs fell, they went too far, or they fell short of London, because by this time we were feeding false intelligence to the Germans of the actual distances that the doodlebugs needed to go. So once that sort of got better, they were also not as effective. However, what was effective were the V2s. The V2 rockets that went in supersonic speed, and those, they went too fast and you couldn't shoot them down. The only way to stop them was to actually go to the launch pads and destroy the launch pads. What happened to the man? You know, Werner von Born? No? They secretly took him to the US. Yeah. The beginnings of NASA. Now, this street that we're going along now, this is one of the streets that was
So we are asking
literally ploughed through after the Great Fire of London. So we're right on the edge of the city now. The city is over to the right and the water is over to the left-hand side. We're leaving the City of London, we're going to head back west and we're going to go through Parliament Square and then finish our tour at Buckingham Palace. Buckingham Palace did not escape unscathed either. Buckingham Palace was bombed 9 times. Most of those times there was not a lot of damage done, the incendiary bombs, but there was a couple of times when Buckingham Palace was badly bombed. Did the King and Queen leave London? No, they stayed here throughout the Second World War. Their children went to Windsor Castle. In fact, our late Queen Elizabeth II, she became a mechanic during the Second World War. So everybody was sort of involved some way in the war effort. But the King and Queen stayed here. And the Queen was booed when she went to the East End of London because so many people had lost their homes, lost their loved ones. And after Buckingham Palace was bombed in December of 1940, the Queen said, at least I can now look the people in the East End in the eye. Where we are now, the embankment, and this was all reclaimed from the river. In Roman times, the river was 3 times the width that it is today. And we built a sewage system underneath here because, you know, we had no sewage system and it was so disgusting. But we're just replacing that sewage system today, and you can see on the left-hand side this is where they're replacing it, and at the moment they've almost finished it, they're just now making a nice seating area on top of it. So you can go out and sit on top of the sewers. But by the time they finished it, you won't know you're on top of the sewer. In just a second, if you look on the left and the right, you are going to see big shiny dragons. Once again, these dragons telling us that we are leaving the City of London. And for the last time today, we will leave the city. So just up here, left and right, big shiny dragons. And over on the other side of the river, you'll start to see some buildings coming into view. And they're in a style we call brutalism, big concrete block style. So here, left and right, the dragons. So there's big concrete blocks down, and they were started in the 1950s. It was literally to cheer everybody up. After the Second World War, they put on a festival there, the Festival of Britain, and then the area developed until today. It's the largest art centre in Europe, and Londoners spend a lot of time over there because throughout the year they've got film and theatre and art exhibitions. The BAFTAs are held here on the South Bank. The BAFTAs are the equivalent, the British equivalent to the Oscars. And then we're about to head under a bridge, and this bridge is called Waterloo Bridge, but it's also known as the Ladies' Bridge. And it's called the Ladies' Bridge because it was built by ladies during the Second World War. Incidentally, it's the only bridge in London to have come in on time and on budget. Shocking. Shocking. It's also self-cleaning, you know, because ladies ain't daft.
It would be.
So here is Waterloo Bridge, built by all the ladies' bridge as we know it as. And you can still see over on the left side now all the buildings of the South Bank. Incidentally, Winston Churchill was laid in state of building in Parliament Square, as was our Queen, our late Queen Elizabeth II. They both had lines going all the way along the South Bank to go and see them or pay their respects laid in state. The Queen's line went from where we are going now all the way to the Tower of London. Here on the left-hand side you can see an obelisk. This is 5,000 years old. You will see the sister obelisk in France, in the Place de la Concorde. It was given to us by Egypt for defeating Napoleon at the Battle of the Nile. We had a bit of a problem though because it's quite heavy that, and we didn't know how to get it back, and this fisherman said, "It's right, I'll get it." So we went over with his crew, a small crew, put the obelisk on his boat, off he went to sea, sank the boat and the crew. We needed a bigger boat. Building on the right hand side is now turned into a posh hotel, but this was the old War Office building just to the right. And we're going to turn right here and head up to our Government Street, Whitehall. So as we continue here on the left hand side, this is the Ministry of Defence building here on the left. And This used to be a palace. There used to be a palace here called the Whitehall Palace, but it burnt down. But underneath this building, there are still the wine cellars of King Henry VIII. And there is a small part of this building that has survived. So the old War Office on the right-hand side is now Raffles Hotel, a very big posh hotel. But at the end here, on the left-hand side, this honey-coloured building. This is the banqueting house that survived the fire. And right at the top window, in the middle, is where King Charles I had his head chopped off. We're going to turn to the left. As we turn to the left, you will see on the other side of the road, but facing us now, they'll be on your right, the Household Cavalry. These are the ones, remember we went past their barracks earlier this morning, and mechanised during the Second World War, reformed as mounted units in 1945 under King George VI. And as we turn to the left, you'll see them. There are two regiments, the Blues and Royals, these ones that you see now, the Blues and Royals, and the Lifeguards, which are an older regiment. Coming up to Downing Street, so you'll get a lot of demonstrations throughout the weekend. Look on the right hand side, we're going to go nice and slowly. This is the Women of World War II Memorial, and you can see all the uniforms that women undertook, the jobs they undertook during the Second World War. Down to the right now is Downing Street. At the bottom of that is number 10 on the right hand side. Number 10 Downing Street, the home of our Prime Minister since the very first in the 1700s. Winston Churchill was also here as Prime Minister. He stayed at Downing Street throughout his time. He was often coming outside and making speeches outside of Downing Street. In the middle of the road now, on the right, is the cenotaph. This is our war memorial to those who died in the First and Second World War and subsequent wars. And I know that later you are going to the Churchill War Room, so the next street on the right-hand side takes you down to the war rooms. On the top of this building on the right-hand side, Winston Churchill used to stand up there and watch the bombing over London. Coming now then into Parliament Square, the heart of British democracy. And we'll see on the left-hand side the Houses of Parliament. The real name of this building is the Palace of Westminster, and you will see Big Ben. You won't actually see Big Ben. Why can't you see Big Ben? Because it's a bell, yes. Why is it called Big Ben? Do you know? It's because the clerk of the works at the time was called Benjamin, you know, so you've got Big Benjamin, Big Ben. I would say it's a good job his name wasn't Richard, but I'll leave that with you. Right. So as we come into the square, now the Parliament building dates to the 1830s, except for a small part of it which survived a fire and dates the 11th century, and that part is Westminster Hall, and it was where Winston Churchill was laid in state 4 days before his funeral at St Paul's Cathedral, and where our late Queen Elizabeth II was laid in state 4 days before her funeral at Westminster Abbey, which is just across the street. We're going to go once all the way around the square, but look on the right and you can see a statue now of Winston Churchill on your right hand side. Churchill chose the spot for his statue when he was surveying some damage from a bomb on the House of Commons. He said that's where his statue would go. So look on your left then, the Parliament building. Here on the left hand side, this little church, St Margaret's. This is where Winston Churchill was married to his American wife, Clementine, here on the left. Clementine actually unveiled the statue of Winston Churchill in the presence of Queen Elizabeth II. And Queen Elizabeth II made a speech. And Winston Churchill, he refused the Queen who was going to give him a dukedom. I was going to make him a duke. But he refused because he wanted to spend the rest of his days in the House of Commons. And if you were a peer, you could not sit in the House of Commons. The Commons is for commoners. On the left-hand side, you will see Westminster Abbey, our coronation church. Every single one of our monarchs since 1066 has been crowned in a church on that spot. We're going to go all the way around, so we'll come back past the church. Nelson Mandela on the right-hand side. He unveiled his own statue. Great honour to have a statue where you're still alive. And on the left, Abraham Lincoln. His statue was put there to celebrate 100 years of peace between our two countries. But it was slightly delayed because we were in the midst of the First World War. So looking over to the Great War, as it was called before we had another one. So right over on the right hand side then, you've got a great view of the House of Parliament. You see the bit that looks a bit like a church, that's Westminster Hall. And our trials used to take place there. So William Wallace, Braveheart, he was sentenced to be hanged, drawn and quartered in that building. Charles I was sentenced to be executed inside that building. And as I said, Churchill and the Queen laid in state. Winston Churchill's statue is supposed to actually be looking at that building. Slightly malaligned, and he's looking at the pub. But he'd be alright with that. Now, Westminster Abbey, we're going to pass as well in just a moment. Now, the cenotaph that we went past was unveiled in 1920 on Armistice Day, and also this was the same day as our unknown warrior was interred in Westminster Abbey. So you've got your unknown soldier in DC, and our unknown warrior. Ours is not a soldier, it is a warrior. And there's a good reason for this, because just as in the Second World War, in the First World War, just for a time, we stood alone. And so, we ran out of boots on the ground. So ours may not have been a soldier. He could have been from the Navy, he could have been a pilot, he could have been conscripted. We don't know who he was, and so to call him a soldier would be wrong. So we have the tomb of the unknown warrior. And he's set right inside this building on the left, Westminster Abbey. And for a very poignant reason, so that everybody who walks into that building, whoever it is, be it me, be it you, be it the royalty, they pass by this tomb as a reminder of those who died, so that our lives continued. And if we have heads of state visiting, they will always go to Westminster Abbey to lay a wreath on the tomb of the unknown warrior. So here on the left-hand side then, you can see the west front of Westminster Abbey. So the royal carriages will pull out, and that's the royal entrance. The Queen's funeral took place there. Princess Diana's funeral took place there. Kate and William were married there. Many, many royal occasions. Okay, everybody, so when we get off at Buckingham Palace, that's where we will finish the tour, but you are going to then go and have lunch, and then you'll visit to the Churchill War Room. So you won't see Martin or this coach again until 5 o'clock this evening. Okay, so you need to take everything that you need with you for the rest of your day. Okay, so when we get up to Buckingham Palace, now Buckingham Palace is the official residence of the monarch, but he doesn't actually live here. And I will explain why not. But the first monarch to live here and make it the official residence was Queen Victoria. Because Queen Victoria, I mentioned earlier, was born in Kensington Palace, but she had a rather, strange relationship with her mother. Her mother was super controlling, and she made her stay and even sleep in the same bedroom as her until she was 18. At 18 years old, she becomes the Queen, and she's like, right, that's it, I'm out of here. So she leaves Kensington Palace, and she moves into Buckingham Palace, and makes it this official residence.